Hi, welcome back to Stock Talk. This is Joe Rabil with Rabil Stock Research. Today's show, I'm going to talk about a lot of stocks because we got a decent amount of requests that came through. I think people were at home over the long weekend, and I definitely had some symbols coming through. So we're going to cover all of those. But again, I always start the show with a lesson, and I had a specific question that came up. In fact, I had two that were somewhat similar. Related to V-bottoms and or fake out patterns. And so I'm going to kind of cover both of those in this lesson today. I have a specific way of looking at these. So let's go ahead and get into the agenda. So we're going to talk about how to handle V-bottoms, which I think are the nemesis of technical analysis in a lot of ways, especially when you're trying to find trends and you're trying to use MACD and ADX to confirm those trends, because realize that those two indicators can be lagging in the immediate, right? We want to use those for help in terms of projecting out. They can be very, very nice tools in advance, but they're not necessarily good for in the moment. Okay, so I'm going to explain that as we get into this. But one of the things that I really focus on when I'm looking at these V-bottom patterns is I look at multiple time frames. This is one of the main reasons why you want to use multiple time frames, so you're not caught off guard looking at a single time frame. And then we want to look at the underlying trend of the bigger time frame, and that will give us some real help in terms of taking advantage of when we have a sell-off on a smaller time frame that looks like the beginning of something big to the downside when it's really not. And that also will create these patterns that are basically fake out breakdowns. I refer to undercut and rally a lot with my subscribers, and it's not necessarily something I created that in terms of the phrase, but I use it a little bit differently because of I'm looking at multiple time frames. I think it can be a huge advantage to look for this pattern. So I'm going to go over that, and then we're going to go through all the stocks that came through. So in terms of the lesson, let's go ahead and look at this chart of MTCH. I've got a monthly chart of MTCH on the left and a weekly chart on the right. And what I wanted to show, so the question that came had to do with how do you take advantage of, in my methodology, how would I take advantage of the V-bottom that took place in early 2020 when we had this violent sell and then an immediate reversal? Because for those of you that know, I don't like the overrun here. I don't like to see strong selling on this. And but there are different things you have to look at when we're getting very powerful selling to the downside. And you have to expand your time frames and make sure you know what you're looking at. So if I see this taking place on a weekly chart and that's all I see, yeah, I've got some support here, but it's not all that intriguing to me. I would be kind of sitting back going, you know what, I'm not in all that big of a hurry to play this. But if I go and look at the bigger time frame, and if we go and look at where we were in early 2020, look at what this was doing. This went through an ABC decline, no doubt, okay? But look at what the moving average environment was doing. Both of these lines were still rising. We have a long-term trend that's still in an uptrend, and we got a deep oversold rating back down to the 40-month moving average and found pretty good support. So, I mean, from that standpoint, obviously by the end of the month, and this line's still rising, that's a very bullish sequence. See how we came all the way back by the end of the month? So in this instance, I think you want to be on the lookout. If the higher time frame is still trending to the upside, I think you want to be on the lower time frame looking for reversal patterns. The reversal pattern I like to use is what I'd call an undercut and rally. And in this case, some are more clear cut, but I thought this was such a great example looking at the longer term time frame. I wanted to use this. So if you notice what happened, we came down and then we undercut this low. Okay, and if you notice, this was a pretty key level. You notice how that area acted as a breakout level. It was resistance, and then it became support. And so as we come back, so we broke that level, and then we immediately resurfaced back above it. Now, just so you know, in this instance, when the volatility is screaming, these indicators are going to lag. I've got to look at other things. And I can tell you one of the things I was looking at was the sentiment numbers when this was dropped, when this was way down, when the market was way down at its low, the bearish sentiment skyrocketed above the bullish sentiment, and it was pretty blatant that we were getting a little overdone based on the how bearish people were getting. So I know that I can't necessarily rely on MACD and ADX for this, so I have to use other things. So I'm going to look at fib levels, but one of the things I can use is these key support and resistance, and I'm looking at price when I'm looking at this, okay? So we know we break that level, and then if we can get back above relatively quickly, within a couple bars, on this time frame it would be a couple weeks. On a daily chart it would be a couple days. So you come down, you might meddle around underneath it for a couple days or a couple weeks in this instance, and then get back above. I'm looking for a little higher bottom to set up. And in this case, it happened right at the 18 and 40 MA before it took off again. So this is really the area on this stock that I would be kind of looking to take advantage, because I know I have an underlying uptrend in place on this time frame. Now, just so you understand, if I've got this line right here, I'm willing to let this play out, and as long as if this makes a higher bottom right at that line or near that line, I'm willing to play it underneath these moving averages. I don't necessarily need that confirmation as long as I've undercut a key level, okay, and then I get a strong reversal back up, and I know that the higher time frame is still in an uptrend, which is key. This is still in an uptrend, okay? So if I do that, this is considered, for me, would be considered an undercut and rally. As long as we come back and test that area, I want to see some kind of a little higher bottom. You could probably do it even more aggressively by going down to a daily chart on this, in this situation, if you wanted to make sure you didn't miss it. But I usually just use the 2 time frames, and in this case, yeah, I would have been I would have been getting long somewhere in the low 80s for a really nice move, which I think was pretty low risk, because this undercut told you it was that the sellers were not strong enough to keep it going down. Now, I want to make sure you get the difference between what took place in 2020 and what's taking place now, okay? Because we had the potential for an undercut. You see how, look at this key level right here. You see this key level? This undercut that level, but it wasn't able to get back above. Instead, what it did was it broke that level and failed at that level, okay? That is completely different. This is completely different than what happened back in 2020. And so now what's taken place is we have an 18-month that's rolled over, okay? This is totally different than what we had here. So now, if I'm playing this, I'm playing a reversion to the mean. I'm playing a counter trend play on Match.com. If I want to play this because I'm saying, wow, this dropped, and then it dropped, and then it dropped, and I've gotten pretty far away from here. I'm coming down into the next support area. MACD is getting overdone a little bit. Yes, I could play this for a retracement, and yeah, it has maybe potential for like a 20% move up to towards 100, maybe even a little bit more. I don't know about that. But the point I'm trying to make here is that this is counter trend, and this is with the trend. So this is, if we're playing this right here, we're going counter trend. This is still with the long-term trend. I prefer to play these. I would go find the stocks that still have this right now, and then look for plays where you can play the trend on the weekly. And I think those are ones that are more powerful than trying to play a counter trend move. Now, what I will say is that playing counter trend right now could be pretty good for the first leg off the low, because a lot of times you get short covering and that type of thing. If we get a rally back up towards the 18-week or something like that, stocks like this and PayPal and Square and Twilio, these stocks that have been killed, probably going to get, if we continue to rally here, we're probably going to get a pretty strong move off their lows. After that, it probably gets a little bit more difficult, but those could be the names to play for a trade. But you have to know that's what they are for a trade. So I just want to make sure I covered this because I do think looking for those undercuts, which are basically fake out breakdowns, right? We're looking for those fake out moves like this, and taking advantage of that when they recross, especially when the underlying trend is still going up. So something to be on the lookout for. And you can even do that right now. But I do think this is a different environment, mostly for tech, that has broken down and the 18 months have rolled over. It's going to be a tougher time with these. I don't think it's a straight up affair like we saw back in 2020. Okay, let's go ahead and get into the analysis now. Before we get into the stocks, my services can be found at rabilstockresearch.com. The individual package, I send out about 2 to 3 reports each week. Also have a special video for that package. So the goal there is to identify, go through thousands of charts and try and identify some stocks that I think have real potential. And then the video helps with ways to implement that depending on what type of trader you are. So if you have an interest in trying it out, use the coupon code StockTalk, and you can get the first 2 months for $50. Let's go ahead and get into the analysis now. Okay, so as we get into the stocks, I'm going to start with the TNX. It was actually one of the requests that came through, and I figured I'd go ahead and use this as an index of the week. So just to follow up from where we are, where we started, we made a pretty nice move off the low, obviously. Broke the trend, came back and held the 18-month line, formed a bit of a pinch there underneath the 0 line, and then have made a really powerful move to the upside. Notice how we had a really strong ADX confirmation, and MACD has made a new high with price as well. So we can actually look at what's taking place right now. We had a pullback play here, which held the 18-week, and that was kind of the kickoff move. That was another little pinch right there, took off, and now we're pulling back again. And I think we probably spend a little bit more time consolidating, maybe get a little bit closer to this line. But it does look to me, based on the momentum conditions, that this is more of a pause in the trend rather than the end of one. Now, we can look at this on a bigger picture and see that we're coming up into a pretty big area and we're very far away from the 18-month line. It just makes sense for this to take a breather here. I would not be in a huge rush if I were looking to be a buyer. Like if we were assuming this was like a stock, right? I would say it probably needs more time to consolidate. But again, the trend is suggesting to me that there's more upside coming. I don't think this is the end of the run. And I think that's going to play a pretty big role in terms of the stock market. So just something to keep in mind. I think this is, again, more of a pause in an ongoing trend. Okay, so SWN, Southwestern Energy. Let's just look at the monthly chart as I zero in a little bit. We see how we rallied up and pulled back. We had good ADX condition. We had a pinch play on the MACD there, right crossing the 0 line, and came back to the 18-month. And then essentially what we had was an opposing trend pattern where we had our ABC on the weekly. We had a 0 line reversal with low ADX, right? So once we got going again, that was kind of the kickoff move for this trend here, the monthly trend. And then what happened is, and these patterns happen in multiple time frames. You see how we made a move up and then we pulled back on the weekly chart, and then we got that opposing trend ABC down. 18 comes down below the 40-day. A little bit of overrun in the MACD, but low ADX, and then we do the move to the upside. So now don't be surprised if we see another pullback on the daily chart and we get that same pattern to develop on the daily after happening on the monthly and then on the weekly. So just keep in mind the markets are fractal, and we're going to see these patterns in all different time frames. ALB pulled back on a monthly chart, found support at the 18-month line. This has good momentum characteristics in place. It's trying to get going again. You can see the move down, and we got the 18 to cross down below the 40-week. But we have had some overrun, and most of the time when I see this, what I'm looking for is this 18 to cup around, and we get a little bit better test of this, and then if we can hold that and turn up, that sort of confirms to me that this trend is getting back in line with this trend. So I think we're pretty close. This is definitely one to watch. We're pulling back. If this actually showed better momentum here, where the ADX got going, then I would say this pullback is probably buyable, but we don't really have that yet. So I'd probably still be looking for a little bit more confirmation on the weekly chart. another shipping company. And, you know, if we look at what happened on the monthly chart, look at this move up and then we'll pull back to the 18-month. Look at the ADX, found support right at the 18-month there. And that, again, the same pattern. I'm going to keep pointing these out because I think this is really important. This is the pattern for my book. It's ABC decline. We get down, MACD gets closer to the zero line. We have no real selling pressure based on ADX, and then we get going again. And then we did the exact same thing on a weekly chart. So you can see we had the move to the upside, we had the pinch after the move to the upside with pretty good ADX, and then we pulled back and found support at the 18-week. And then we have the exact same pattern taking place in the daily. So again, don't be surprised if this pulls back and holds the daily chart and we get the same pattern on a daily with the hourly trigger. So these are the kinds of things you just want to be on the lookout for. And this tells you where you are in the sequence, because obviously getting in down here at 16 and a half, somewhere in there is optimum for long-term trade. Now, if we're playing this, we got to look at this more as a short to intermediate term play if we get an entry off the daily chart. But all systems go on this. Everything looks pretty good. RS is hitting a new high. So I think that's pretty bullish. Now, AMD, I think, you know, my concern here is we had a pretty deep pullback. By the way, do you see how you can now put an outline on the wick as well as the candle? I requested this and they were kind to add this. I really like the looks of these candles where you get the green and the red, but you have them surrounded by, I use blacks as a outline, and it just really kind of defines them really well. So anyway, just something I thought I'd point out. They keep adding more to this program, which is really nice. So look at the move up, and you see how it has more like a V-top look to it. There's definitely some resistance up here at 125. The question is this going to be able to get back above the 18-month line? And I'm not sure about that, at least not right now. We had this move to the downside. So I don't have to really make that decision at this point because we have overrun on MACD on the weekly. So what I would be waiting for is for this to recross the 18 and prove that it can hold the 18 because of what's happening here. I don't think I want to be a hero and try and jump in and try and catch a bottom or try and pick a bottom because the underlying trend here is in question now. So you know, you don't have to be jump on this. Low price doesn't necessarily mean low risk, right? We want to wait for low risk entry, not a low price entry. Okay, so JKS, really, I mean, this has a really interesting look. Look at the breakout and notice how, despite all the volatility and everything, we came back and essentially held this 40 area, which has been a key area. So I find that to be really encouraging. And one thing you might not spot, you got to get better at spotting these if you can't. You see this higher bottom here, and this is a lower bottom. This is clearly on a monthly chart, a reverse divergence, and look at how strong the ADX is. So we've got the underlying trend in place. Now on a weekly chart, we're trying to start climbing, but we haven't gotten away or broken from this area. I would say like mid-60s resistance. We have low ADX. So if you have low ADX on a time frame, in most cases, you're going to want to see it break out. Draw the trend line, that horizontal trend line, and make it break out. Now, the other way you could do this is if this moves up and doesn't break out and then makes a higher low, and we see improving ADX gets above 25, you can buy this in anticipation of a breakout to the upside, almost like a probe trade, because you don't know that this is actually broken yet, but you're assuming based on the momentum improvement. So that's two ways you could be looking at this. Use the daily. If it shows in strength, you can do it. If it doesn't, wait for the breakout above these highs. So Intuit is more like the AMD and actually a little bit worse. Look at this monthly. You see how, again, another big V-top. Now, here's the interesting thing. One of the things I learned from my study of GAN all those years, you see how this hits 700, and now we've come down to approximately 350. So you take 50% off the high. We have reached a pretty important level here, okay? 50% off the high is an area where you want to start looking for signs of a bottom. And we got our first sign, which is this bottoming tail. Now, the problem is in the process of doing this, we hurt the trend because look at how we broke the 18-month and the 18-month is rolling over. So I'm just sort of the opinion now that we're probably going to start to find some support. Now, one thing I'll tell you is if we can't hold this low, if this low ends up breaking, you do not want to own a share of this stock, okay? This is in serious trouble if it can't hold the 50% retracement off the high, especially because it did it in a straight line. I mean, it hardly took a breather all the way down. So this should find support here. It should start to consolidate, maybe start to see the MACD show signs of a little bit of improvement by crossing the signal line or something like that. But it's not ready to go up. See, there's a big difference between going down and going sideways. So I think this is the process of going sideways. I don't think we're ready to go from down to up like we were in 2020 where it just went down and straight up. This is different. This is more damage. Expect some resistance overhead as you rally up, probably around 500 for sure, and then kind of working sideways from there. Enterprise partners. So this is really interesting. Another one where we kind of undercut this key level, and this is a little bit different. We made a move down and then a rally up, but really this one here where you held the 18-month, it's almost like a spike low and then a ledge formed. And it's not exact, I mean, the way it played out, but I like to look for these where they're getting back above a key level from historically speaking. And it's a little hard to see with the way this is set up, but it basically got back above the real resistance here by holding this 18-month. We had a pinch in place, and now we're starting to turn back to the upside. Again, notice how now we're holding the 18-week. The only thing that's missing here is ADX. You see how ADX is low in all three time frames, so we don't have that confirmation yet. But I think this is a type of stock that could evolve into a stronger trend. We could continue to see improvement from that standpoint. Now, Netflix does look like it's trying to make a short-term bottom, but just understand the difference between a short-term low and a meaningful low. Like this is probably going to spend a lot of time going sideways. Could be as long as 6 months, 12 months, something like that. There's a lot of damage to this chart. You got to look at this more like an injured athlete who was carted off the field. Okay, this is going to take, he's got to go through an entire rehab process, maybe like, ACL or something like that, where you have to go through the full process of rehab. It's not going to be able to get back on the field quickly. So just keep in mind that's how you're looking at this. And then if you do understand that, yeah, you can try and find trades off the shorter term timeframes. Parkland Fuel, this is off the Toronto Exchange. So the question here was related to, this, looking at this trend line here. Is this a buy? And just based on the fact that this was starting from below the 18-month line, I think you got to be a little bit more careful. What I think I would do is make this breakout. Don't buy the break of the trend line. Make this green DI get going and hold. Make this turn. In fact, I'd love to see the ADX start to turn up. And then if we can make a higher low above the trend line. So look for the 2. And then if we're seeing signs of improvement, you could buy as it's turning up from 2. If it's not, you might need the confirmation of getting through the 3 here. But it's a stock to watch. We had a big spike down. We're held the midpoint of that decline on this pullback here. So there are signs of improvement. I want to see a little bit more confirmation. Wire is really intriguing. Look at the blowout move on the monthly chart and the consolidation that's taken place. This is a really bullish momentum condition with pinch here and strong ADX here. Look at how the two moving averages have come together. We got a zero line reversal with low ADX. I mean, I'd be watching this really closely, for a potential entry here. This is pretty intriguing. Bunge, this had a pretty decent move. It's actually made a pretty decent move on the monthly chart. We're now pulling back on the weekly. Watch for this to come back above this prior high here, maybe get back through 120 to get a little bit more confirmation because we did have MACD overrun. But this is one that you could be watching for an entry if we see strength again. Archer Daniels is a little extended away on the monthly chart, but we've pulled back on the weekly. Now, the one thing that's bothering me here is that we had this MACD cross its signal line. So when I see that, we get a move up, and we normally like exactly what it's doing. You see how it rallied up to like the midpoint? It should come back down, and then if it makes another bottom and turns back up, that's where I want to be looking for this. So we're starting to do that now. It could play out something like that. If it works out that way, I would be willing to play it. But you got to be careful when the MACD is so. The way I look at this is if the MACD has made a pretty decent move away from the 0 line, then I'm looking to give this a little bit more time because it's probably going to consolidate a little bit. If we get one of these overruns closer to the 0 line, then I'm not as worried about it, and I could play the initial signal. But in this case, look for some kind of a double bottom and then a reversal back up. This has really good momentum characteristics on the higher time frame. That's all the time we have today. Thanks for watching. Please feel free to reach out. My contact information is listed. Also, if you have an interest in having one of your stocks reviewed on the show, send it to stocktalk@stockcharts.com. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time.
Hey, Grayson Rose here with StockCharts. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, consider giving it a like down below, maybe leave us a comment, and if you're new to the channel, you can subscribe at the link up above. We're gonna bring you daily content from an incredible collection of technical analysts and financial experts.